Welcome to The Real Recipe, the podcast that brings you the perfect blend of real estate trends and topics, where we serve up fresh insights and sizzling strategies. So let's get cooking.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of The Real Recipe. Today we have one of our favorite people with us. Don't get jealous. Lauren Plum. She's a partner at Morgan Engineering and arguably one of the people who always gets us out of a jam. So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about the company first, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of it.
A little bit about Morgan Engineering.
Yeah.
We've been around for about 30 years now. We cover all of New Jersey from tip to toe. We are a full-service company. We do the surveying work. We do the engineering work, so it's a one-stop shop. Mm-hmm. And we're really good at what we do, and we try and get everybody's back and take care of our clients the best we can.
They are very, very good at what they do.
Yes.
I love using them.
Thank you.
So, you want to jump in?
Yeah. So
Right.
This, I guess, applies to everybody who's a first-time home buyer or someone who's a regular homeowner now, but let's start at the beginning. What's the purpose of a land survey, and what are some of the reasons people would have to acquire one?
That's a good question. One I can spend at least an hour and a half on,
Right.
but we're going to make it really short. The main purpose of getting a survey is to take your boundary, your property, what it describes, and put it on the ground and physically show you exactly where it is. Your deed might say it's 50 by 100, but where is it on the ground? Mm-hmm. That's the first layer of a survey. The second layer of a survey are putting in the features that are located on that boundary and around that boundary. So the house, the driveway, the shed, all of that stuff, the fences, maybe the neighbor's shed, all put it on the survey so you know exactly where everything is. Mm-hmm. The third layer that I want to talk about is the easements. So what we do is we take all the title work that they send us and we start going through it and we say, what affects this property? And there might be a lot of easements that affect the property. It might be conservation easements, might be sewer easements, but whatever, you need to see that to see how it affects the use of your property. You might be wanting to put in a swimming pool, and all of a sudden you get the survey and says, well, there's a 40-foot easement in your backyard. I don't know if you're putting in that swimming pool. Yep. So those are the main concerns, especially for a title survey, a boundary survey for a closing.
Right.
Or the best, you get the wetland buffer, and you're like, you can't build anything in this area, in your backyard.
Yeah.
You can't do anything.
Yeah.
You know?
So it's slightly more than just putting markers on the ground and putting a flag where the four corners are, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Slightly more complicated.
It's slightly more complicated.
Which is why we tell clients to get it up front.
Yes.
Right? And I don't think it matters if you are a first-time home buyer, a seasoned buyer, an investor. If you're buying a piece of land, not a condo, right? Because you don't need it with condos, right? But if you're buying a piece of land, you want a survey.
Yeah.
You want to know
real estate. Any type of real estate, standalone real estate.
Standalone real estate, yeah. Vacant land. We just had one. We had vacant land. The deal died over it, but there were a lot of conservation easements on that property and a lot of wetlands, and it was disclosed that we could buy the whole property and build on the whole thing, and that was not the case.
Definitely.
After we spoke to your engineer.
My apologies.
No. You
Don't want to kill the deal.
No, but you saved us a lot of money.
Right.
And we were able to get out of the deal. So it's very important to get the survey up front and don't wait post-closing to do it, right?
Up front and don't wait post-closing. I brought something with me today. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it on the camera, but this is a survey that came across my desk yesterday. And it just goes to talk about why you should get a survey up front.
The importance of it, yeah.
The importance of it. This person did not have a survey for closing, but they decided afterwards they were going to do something with the property, so they needed a survey.
Now, did they get, because sometimes when we do the lending on it, we'll get a no survey certification, or we'll get maybe an old survey that could have been, 10, 15, 20 years old, maybe an older, 50 years old.
But they won't.
Right?
They won't insure it. It has to be 5 years or less usually.
Right? I am just going to say I'm going to assume that they didn't have anything.
Right.
Okay.
That's all I'm going to say.
They were shocked by this.
I would imagine after seeing this that they did not have one.
What happened is the occupation of the features on the property and the tax map all appear to be showing this property as 100 by 100. And I don't know if you can zoom in on this or not, but the deeds, clearly all the deed work in the title search
That says 50.
Right.
show it 50 by 100.
So
That's half of 100.
So
That's half.
So the clear area here is what the borrower owns. This
That not so much.
grayed out area, we don't know quite who owns that.
So this is an example of why you get a survey for your closing, not after your closing.
Yeah.
The title company and the attorney could have fixed this, could have thrown it back on the seller, said, hey, what happened in the chain of title? Where did it go wrong? But they didn't do that.
So then let's talk about that. Now, I know we talk on all the episodes about ordering title, the importance of ordering it early, but then also getting the survey ordered early in conjunction with that. Because if this came up during the course of a regular purchase, how would, I mean, outside of the initial shock and awe, how would we go about, from an attorney's perspective, kind of working through that?
So when I get that survey and I've calmed down from reviewing that and I've called you and Joe and everyone at the title company and then I've bombarded Lauren with a million questions. No, I look at that survey before I even call my client. I'm calling Lauren and her team to say, what is going on here? And
is this the right property?
Are we sure? This isn't just a shed on someone's property. We're talking about someone built a house on half of this lot that they think they own. And they might not even own it, right? So it's a joint effort between myself, between Morgan Engineering, between Real Safe Title to resolve this issue, because that is, yes, it's a survey issue, but that's a title issue.
Right.
Somewhere along the way, I would
We're
presume that there's something there that's showing ownership of that. It might have just got
Something
lost
fell
somewhere.
off. Something fell off somewhere,
right.
pretty much.
Yeah, but that's a big
No.
big difference.
There
right?
might have been a track 1 and a track 2,
Yeah,
and they might
just-
have not conveyed the track 2 kind of thing. So you have to go, sometimes you have to go further back in the chain of title to see where that mistake.
Right, because what do you normally search? How far back do you do? 60?
So, I mean, it depends on the property. A lot of underwriters will accept 40 years back for a search. Ideally, if someone has an owner's policy, then we can kind of, nip that in the bud, so to speak, and we don't have to go back as far, and we have a little bit of resolution as to an issue if this were to come up.
Ties into this, but enhanced policies, which we've talked about before, would this assist in helping?
So, I mean, before we even get there, the whole benefit to getting the survey and getting a new survey, and I know that you had brought up a good point about what if the seller had a survey and signed an affidavit of no change or whatever it might be. Really, this is so important, because whenever Lauren comes to do an office meeting or we're talking to a group of people, especially realtors, if a buyer asks, do I really need a new survey? The builder had one or the seller had one, and they're going to sometimes, if they're not going to sign an affidavit of no change, then I can't imagine why somebody would accept that. But what's really the purpose, or what's the point of getting a new survey, even if the seller has a survey? Because, there's errors along the way. We want to make sure that new buyer has a survey endorsed to them. But also the important part of having the survey with the title insurance is the title insurance company insures that survey.
Right.
So in this instance, we would have seen that this was an issue. Obviously, that's kind of it's like a huge red flag. But if you know that up front, or if you get a survey and everything looks copacetic, if you have a boundary line dispute after the fact, then that's where the title insurance comes into effect, and that can help you as a homeowner. So
but to resolve this, obviously, once the three of us talk, it's usually okay. Sit down with the client, send this to them,
right.
but get them on the phone and say, "Hey, I'm sending this to
Are
you."
So sitting down, because we're gonna have to have a really interesting conversation.
This isn't something where I'm sending the client, "Hey, driveway is about 2 feet over. We're going to have to figure this out with the seller," or "Hey, there's a shed, might need to be moved," or a boundary line agreement. This is, I don't know if they own half this property. so we sit down with the client. I will email this over to the client, get on the phone with them. I will go through the entire survey with them, explain to them what the actual issue here is, right? And this is a huge issue. And then we draft a letter to the seller, and we say, along with the survey, here you go. I'm sure you will be equally as shocked when you get this.
But this is obviously a very extreme set of circumstances. Most of the stuff you get is the fence thing is probably the most common, I would think.
That's the most common.
Up north, driveways.
The driveways, the shared driveways, the fences, the sheds, things like that. But it's surprising the amount of surveys that we do see in a year where there is a building encroachment. Last week or the week before, we didn't have a building encroachment. What we had was a well that was servicing our property, and it was on the neighbor's property. In a well in a well house. So
good.
there are different things that you do see that are significant.
It's common. I mean, you run into oddities or some weird things. Fairly common. Yeah.
I think being in.
You know what's funny? Like, you would think that I know my house is here. This is my lot. That's it. Like, it shouldn't really be that complicated.
Lauren has a good saying that she always starts off meetings with.
We're teeing you right up.
I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go.
Because for me, like, I'm trying to think about it as a consumer. Like, okay, because I get it a lot. Like, why am I paying $700,000, $800,000, $900,000, whatever for a survey? Maybe more at this point. $2,000. I don't know.
No, I mean, you're looking somewhere between $750, $800 for what? Under an acre? Half an acre?
Half acre.
Right.
Acre.
Yeah.
So,
I get it a lot because you go through the closing costs, and one of the things that does stick out is the survey. And a lot of clients, I'll say to them, like, well, look, how old is the survey? And they're like, I don't know. Well, then you probably should get one. If it's an older survey or you don't know, like, and I'll say that you got to defer to John and talk to him about it. But as the consumer, you look at that and you're like, do I need that? Do I really need that?
Real quick, the conversation I have with the client, we talk about ordering title, and immediately the same in that conversation, we talk about ordering the survey. Yeah. It's all insurance. Right. It's all insurance. It's to ensure. CYA, it's to ensure that post closing, in my opinion,
you don't have this.
You're spending $800 to $1,000 on a home inspection. You will probably spend a few $1,000s on your insurance policy. You're spending whatever my legal fee is on that matter, whatever it is, $1,500, $2,000, right? These are all services that you are retaining to ensure that you're protected. So why would you not get a survey? Right. Because the survey will protect you post closing, right? Or it will protect you or resolve issues before you close, and you don't have a situation like this where I'm going to push off $800 now because I don't know. I like taking risks, and $10,000 post closing sounds fine to me.
But to the point of the conversation, right? Like, and then, something happens down the road, or you move in, and 6 months later you're sitting in your backyard and you go, you know what? I need a new fence. You know what? I don't like this fence, or I want to put in a new shed. And then all of a sudden it's, I don't have a survey. And then all of a sudden your neighbor comes over and goes, hey, you're putting in a new fence. Well, that's on my property. And then you go, well, I don't have a survey. And then your neighbor whips out her survey, which is from 1950, and now you're arguing, right? Which it probably happens.
It happens more than you think. And the other thing is that people should be aware of is you think that surveying is an exact science. Well, sometimes in some areas it's not an exact science, because the neighbor might come along with their survey and you might have a new survey of yours, but they don't match. Right. They just don't match. And there's areas that there are things that we rely on out in the field, and it's called control. It's like monuments, corners set, hedgerows, street widths, all those different things we take into consideration, and filed maps. Sometimes when you line them up, they just don't match, and it's not anything any surveyor is taking into context wrong. It's just that there are areas that don't work well.
Well, things can move, right? I mean, back in 1600, 1700, 1800, that's what they used. They used monuments. They used measurements from different things, I would think, right?
Well, we still use monuments.
No, but you know what I mean? Like things like...
marble monuments back then.
Right. But things can change. The land can change. Development
subdivision.
Subdivision. Things can be shifted and moved around.
What did we talked about with your engineer with the wetlands and the conservation easement is that wetlands change over time. They can increase, they can decrease. Yeah. So, naturally, you really do want to update your survey, and like to wrap up that piece is you have the conversation with the client to let them know you get the survey now as insurance post closing. Resolve any issues right now, so post closing you do not have to worry about now calling your attorney, now calling the surveyor, now getting back in touch with your title company and rehashing all this when it could have just been resolved. And worst case scenario, you don't close on the transaction, but you saved yourself a ton of money, or you delay the transaction and resolve it up front and then close with peace of mind. and that's the conversation.
So what are, I mean, obviously I listed off a few, but what, in your opinion, like what's the most common stuff that you see? Like what's the biggest challenge that you run into?
Common number one.
Mistakes or problems
Mistakes,
that you...
issues, errors. Number one is shared driveways. Number one, especially in North Jersey. We
are now in North Jersey.
Yeah. North Jersey. You have like mom and dad lived here, son and daughter-in-law lived here. They had parking on the street. They decided to put in a driveway. They don't need an easement because they're family. Mom and dad move away, son and daughter-in-law move away. New people own both houses. They don't even like each other. One's going to put up a fence, and the other one realizes they have 4 feet left of their driveway.
Yep.
And it's like the number one. It's like ding, ding, ding,
Well,
ding.
it's funny you say that. My neighbors, mom is on my street, son is on the street behind us. No fence in between the backyards. They share the backyard. That's just how they built the houses. Because they were family, right? Yeah. But as the years go on and people sell that home, I'm sure, someone's going to have to put up a fence at some point, right? But you're right. When families buy properties near each other, it's like, who cares? But on the resale side, it's an issue.
Yeah. The other thing, and I think I was going to bring this up later on, but it just fits in so well right here, is family-owned properties that have been in the family since the 1800s. Those are always problematic because, number one, the deeds are vague. They went to a stone, or they went to a tree, and they went to John's house, and things like that.
Right.
But as they get passed down from relative to relative, there is never a survey done. It's just referencing the deed beforehand and referencing the deed beforehand. And by the time you get to it, we just did one last month, I believe it was, where the people finally got a survey and they were horrified and they said, no, that is not what we own. That is not what we own. We own this. And it's like, it's not what you own. This is what you own. And they went into a panic because it caused a huge problem with them.
Right.
But those are also big issues that we see.
Sure.
What's a challenge that you have, like a field challenge or, a back office challenge that you would say that you run into most when conducting surveys?
Lauren's like, there's so many.
There's so many.
There's probably so many. I think that a lot of people really don't know what the turnaround time for a survey is. Maybe we do. I mean, we certainly do when we call you last minute and someone's like, my client decided last minute they want a survey. You're like, I can have someone there tomorrow.
I go, Lauren, I need this as a rush.
Yeah,
She's
she
like,
hears that so much from everybody.
Okay. No, there was a point in COVID, like in real COVID times, when it wasn't just like one. It was client literally like a week before closing is like, oh, I'll take that survey that you.
Yeah.
Like I'll
get it.
Like
I'll get it.
I was a waiter. Like, you know what? That does sound good. I'll have that. And I'd be like, Lauren, yeah, right? Yeah. Lauren, this is the 10th one I sent you this week that it has to be expedited. She's like, yeah, you and every other attorney that I'm working with right now needs it expedited.
So what are some of the challenges? Because obviously last minute, if you get it up to a property, and you can't, there's weather, whatever it might be, what's the most common issue?
Completely overgrown.
Yeah.
No,
exactly.
or seller won't let you on the property.
Everything that you're saying, everything that you're saying, the weather, the rain, the wind, the ice, that's an issue for us. Animals, not just dogs. We've run into goats and bears and all.
She's like, the sellers, the animals,
wild turkeys. They've thrown our field crews up against a house. It's all those things that they have to put up with.
Sure.
The topography of the property. Sometimes you get this beautiful house, and then all of a sudden you go in the backyard and it drops down 50 feet.
Yeah.
We don't have mountain climbing gear. We're not equipped for that.
You should invest in that.
But
you should.
Seriously. But the biggest problem is probably the people.
Okay.
It's the people,
Sellers.
Yeah.
the sellers, or it's a rental property. They get off the property. They call the police. We just tell our field crews, move on. Call the office, move on. We'll work it out. We'll call the attorney.
I was gonna say I'll get emails.
John.
I got one 2 weeks ago from you guys. It was, John, they won't let us on the property, and I'm like, I thought this property was vacant, and they disclosed that it was vacant. It wasn't. There were actually people living in there. They're tenants, and we didn't know.
But wouldn't you think like people like like, wouldn't a seller or a tenant at least know that? Hey, by the way, this is.
No,
going
I
on?
mean,
Like,
if the seller doesn't let the tenant know, hey, I'm having
are we just not in that day and age where people would go
don't communicate?
Hey, by the way, you're not. Yeah, right.
No, people don't communicate.
I'm having people come by to do inspection.
No, that's
By text only communication.
Right. No, Lauren's right. That's one of the biggest issues we face when I'm on the buying side is the communication between the agents and the parties involved. Like, hey, I'll email. I just got confirmation. Survey's being done next week. Obviously, we need access. You would think that's enough, but it's not. Yeah.
It makes it fun.
Yeah.
I'm sure it keeps it interesting.
And I'm sure being in North Jersey during the winter times makes it really easy to do surveys. So,
Right.
Actually, this winter was probably perfect because there's no snow.
No snow.
There is no climate change,
Any,
right?
wait,
No
any
climate change.
any crazy stories with the seller? Like
Right.
sellers running out in like a robe, like with a knife in hand.
Well,
like,
this is like when you asked when we had Mike's.
No, I always love it because I always
love.
love the fun stories. Like
What's your nightmare story?
there's got to be one that sticks out in your head.
I mean, there's so many. I mean, there's always the ones that, the person who blocked the van so they couldn't leave, so they could call the police. But the police understand what a survey is, and they understand,
This is the 10th call we got this week.
But, they won't let them out. Or when the field crews are looking for control down the road, because you need more control than just in front of your house. You have to get as much control as you can in order to nail that survey down on the ground.
Right.
Are you saying like using like the neighbors' properties?
The neighbor property
Yeah.
corners,
Yeah.
the monuments that are placed on neighbors' properties,
Yeah.
things like that. As a surveyor, our obligation is to locate all of those, which means we might have to make a little tiny hole in their sod and lift it up in order to locate that control, put the
Yeah.
sod back down. But what happens is, like, Mary next door sees us over on Johnny's property and she is running out, calling the police in her pajamas, screaming and yelling.
Yeah.
It's like, what are you doing?
I mean, I think you just need to ask questions because I had a shed being put in, and even it was my property, and some guy was just walking up my driveway and looking over my fence, and I'm like, looking through the ring camera, I'm like, who is that? But just go outside and ask a question. I did. I went in my backyard. I'm like, hey, and he's like, oh, John. And I looked. I was the guy who owned the company. I just couldn't tell it was him. But just go outside and ask questions. You don't need to go running and calling the cops. Someone's not digging up your grass because they're, they need extra sod in their backyard.
Well,
right.
I think they're out there with equipment too. I mean, your field crews out
Right.
there, they have more,
Yeah.
uniforms on.
They're well
so-
identified.
Right.
It's not
Exactly.
The
Joe
vans
Sch-
are wrapped. They have
right.
cards. They have documentation. It's
Joe Schmo walking down the street with a shovel.
Right, randomly, like just whistling through the backyard.
I wanted to touch on like the different types of surveys. I think
Yeah.
okay.
you wanna go into that? Yeah.
There's a lot of different types of surveys. Obviously, I think we've covered the boundary title survey
Yeah, yeah.
pretty well. But there's also the tideland surveys. We're in New Jersey. There are a lot of tidelands. When
Yep.
Title does a search and they do a tideland search and it says possible claim,
0.3%.
point.
Yeah.
Such a headache.
Then it's up to us to
Figure
decipher,
it out, yeah.
is there a grant that covers that tidelands claim? Is there a licensed lease? Or do they actually have a claim that needs to be addressed? So that's a much, much more complicated survey, takes a lot longer, costs a lot more.
Yep. And
There's-
real quick, that's more of an issue for you guys down south than us up here,
Well,
right?
yes.
More
and
so- I mean,
no,
look, more so
because
than up here, but-
in Hoboken, Jersey City,
Well,
you
right.
actually
Aside
have
from
a lot of that going
Of
on.
course,
But yes,
'cause you're
the
by the-
Jersey
but-
Shore all day
Jersey
long.
Shore, yeah.
But waterfront properties down near the shore, like the properties that are on the bay and whatnot.
the bulkheads.
Right.
You have. I mean, yeah. I've had large percentage of. And when I say large, when you get like in the 10 to 15% of claimed Thailand's claim, that's a lot. But that's another conversation.
Right.
You have
And we've had a
with
couple
clients.
this last year actually where I can't imagine why someone would buy a waterfront property and not do that type of survey, because we had a couple with a lot of information that went back and forth. Was there was a claim on it and it was a large one, but there was a whole issue with like the licensing and things like that. So if you don't get that survey, I mean, these buyers, they actually ended up resolving it, but fortunately they got the survey, but walking into a huge issue. I mean, to the point where they really stuck with it, but they could have potentially not resold the home. That would have been a big problem.
But that's a great point, because yes, we live in New Jersey and a lot of people are looking for second homes down the shore. So to touch on that, when when are you ordering the Tidelands survey, and when, am I ordering it after title comes in because I see that there's a claim, or
Right.
or because I'm buying
Yes.
down the shore, I should just order a Tidelands survey?
Well,
right?
there's certain counties where it's not applicable, but down the shore, I mean, I think there's only
Right, but
a couple
most
counties
likely
that
you're
require
waiting.
that.
You're waiting until the survey comes in, and we
You're-
see that there's a claim.
No, you're
No,
you're
we'll see
waiting
it.
until title
Yeah.
does the title search.
Right,
I mean,
that's-
does the Thailand
Thailand
search.
search.
Right.
And that's when you might have ordered a survey already, and
But
we
we
might
need to
be in the
update it.
process. All of a sudden, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
it's showing a possible claim. Now we need to do the Tidelands. And I
Right.
just want to interject one thing, because everybody assumes that because it's on the water, that there's a possibility of a Tidelands claim. There
Not
are
always the
lots.
case.
They're not
Oh,
always
no.
the case.
Yeah.
There are lots of areas where it is inland, but it's
Right.
just happened to have like this fingerling. There used to be a stream that went through the property, and that can possibly is a lot of times a Tidelands claim. And
Okay.
those are the last ones to be resolved, because nobody is looking at them, because they say, well, I'm not by the water.
It's a good
Well,
point.
what exactly is a Tidelands claim? So just real quick
Any land that had water formerly flowing on it, the state owns it.
I'd
So
love to have a
they
full podcast on how to get rid of
Yeah.
the Tidelands claim, because
It's a
Yeah.
that's
No,
a
listen,
long.
we could have a 2-hour plus
Right.
seminar / podcast on Tidelands claims.
Yes.
And how we just need to just get rid of them.
But in
because
short, that's a
Yeah.
great answer
Yeah,
to that,
it is.
because most people, especially if you sell in an area where where you think there's not a lot of Tidelands claims, that is just a good way to summarize it.
absolutely. And what else you got?
What else do I have? I guess the one thing that is important to me is that the client knows what they're looking at when they're looking at a survey. Like, they
Right.
get the survey, it's like, okay, fine, but what does this
This is
mean to me?
gibberish to me.
Or are
Right.
they just throwing it in the pile because they're so busy,
No.
signing everything else? And it's one of those things that they really have to, obviously, with the survey we looked at today, they need to know the size of their property. They need to pay attention to the encroachments and how they affect the use of their property, because
Yeah.
that's monumental.
Or the setbacks.
Or the setbacks.
What are your setbacks? That's important too.
Absolutely.
Like, I'll go over that with the clients. Here are your setbacks. This is what you can do. Can I put a pool in? Well, let's see what the town says about setbacks and how far that needs to be off your property line, or,
Absolutely.
there's a lot to discuss for sure.
I think that's the one thing, and it's, I can't stress it enough, to just have a real estate attorney, an attorney that does real estate all the time,
Yeah.
all the time, and not that nephew that does litigations and
Or estate work.
Or estate
it's,
work.
Right, because we've seen that happen where
It's-
clients get the survey, and maybe there is hopefully not a catastrophic issue, because we would alert the client, but if they have just even a small encroachment, fence line, whatever it might be, the attorney's not reviewing that with them, and obviously we bring it to their attention, but it would be ideal if the attorney would review and read that survey with them as well prior to closing, hopefully by the
that's-
time of closing, but then they'll put it in their pile. They won't look at it, and then they'll go to do something like have a fence installed or have something updated, put pavers in, and then they'll call and they'll say, I didn't realize, no one told me that this,
You didn't
my
tell me about
fence
this."
was on my neighbor's property.
I tell people about every little encroachment.
Yeah.
And I explain to them, hey, this is, it says 0.7. It's less than a foot. We're fine. I just want to point it out to you.
Yeah.
Right? So you understand that's not your property, or that is your property, whatever it might be. But every little possible encroachment on the property gets pointed out to the client when the survey comes in, so they understand everything. Gets put in an email with the survey. We have a discussion, because most clients have no idea. Look, most attorneys have no idea what they're even looking at on a survey.
And that is actually true. That's why Morgan Engineering started putting those little discussion topic blocks on the survey, because there are so many attorneys that don't even know what they're looking at. And so we
Right.
started putting the discussion topics. By the way, the driveway is encroaching by 2 feet, that kind of thing. And I think the last thing that I just wanted to bring up is my favorite
I love this saying.
Oh, here it is,
my
finally. I
favorite
was waiting for it. I thought you were going to say it before.
This
but
is
you didn't.
such a good closing line too, because it really summarizes the importance of a survey and how we cannot overlook it in a real estate transaction.
Okay, this better be good.
Well, you had mentioned before about you're buying a house. You're not buying a house.
Yeah.
You're buying the land. The house just happens to be sitting on it.
Right.
You're not buying the house, you're buying the land. That's it.
Absolutely.
It's so simple. But it's so true, because everyone's like, yeah, I'm buying the house. What'd you buy? I bought a beautiful house in wherever. But you also bought the land that it sits on.
Most
Right.
importantly.
So you better know what's on that land that you own and what's
house
on
can
that
always
land
be
that you don't own.
replaced.
You're right.
The
right.
land can't.
Right. Right.
And you want to make sure you know what land you own.
That's it.
Absolutely.
That's it. Bottom line.
And that's really the only way to definitively find out is to get a survey. But
Yes.
thank you again so much, Lauren.
Oh, this was
You're
a lot of
such an
fun.
amazing resource to us and to our clients, and we're so appreciative of that.
The entire company.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us.
All right.
It's a wrap, baby.
Till next time.
Till next time.
Till next time.